Welcome to Catch and Go. In today's telecast, we're going to do part 2 to the title called The Rise of Erdogan, but the rise of the Saudi Crown Prince. Below it, write the Alliance, and below that, the 10 Undistinguished King. We're going to continue from part 1 of this title, so we're going to go straight into the first PowerPoint. And PowerPoint number 1 was the Abraham Accord. And I'm not going to take too long explaining these PowerPoints because I have said the final structures, but there's different structure in the final empire to the revived Roman Empire in the Beast Empire and the masterpiece of the Antichrist. So PowerPoint number 1 was the Abraham Accord, and I want to come straight out and make this very clear. That the structure of the border peace is entirely one structure that's entirely different when it comes to the structure of the Middle East Alliance and the coalition, and not only the coalitions of nations from the Islamic Nations in the Arab world, where Erdogan is going to go up to the north. The Lord showed me with Ethiopia. He's showing me not only Libya, God is showing me also Spain. And the grace of God said, get ready for the invasion from the north. And you need to understand, in pencil in my closing 2 verse, that God is sending warning shots. And that is Matthew 25 verse 6. And then seconds later, the grace of God said, 1 Thessalonians chapter 5 verse 2. So let's go back and let's take our time and let me slow down. I want to make this very clear that the structure to the Abraham Accord, those leaders are entirely different than the leaders that you're going to see from the Middle East. I want to make that very clear. When it comes to the Middle East Alliance and those leaders in the Middle East, in this Arab nations, they're going to come together with Erdogan and invade from the north the nation of Israel. I want to make that very clear. Then a different structure that you have in place are the 10 kings. I want to make that very clear. Those are 10 leaders out of the Middle East that rise up during the last 3.5 years, which we call the Great Tribulation. The 10 kings come on board in the nick of time, but they come on board in the last 3.5 years of the Great Tribulation. No one knows them. They've never held a leadership position, but they will be known by God, and they will come and make a pledge and allegiance to the Antichrist. They're going to come together for the common good, okay, with 4 kings, 4 leaders, with the globalists and leaders around the world. And what you're going to see is a final empire, but different structures in place, not only being able to monitor under this different structure, but under these different technology and infrastructures that are being put in place. So the 10 kings are a different structure. The structure in which Erdogan is putting together is a different coalition of nations. And then you have the structure of the border peace. There's different structures. I want to make that very clear. So the Abraham Accord is not the final structure. I want to make that very clear. Now, for PowerPoint number 2, to the first set of PowerPoints, I said that it was the Saudi Crown Prince, the enforcer of the covenant, Daniel 9 verse 27. And that's why I said to you to go and read Daniel 8 verse 26, because it talks about seal the books until not only the future. In other words, they are future events. And God has been saying for the last 2 weeks that he is now ready to reveal what he just said to me, the mystery. That's the word he used, the mystery of the book of Daniel, and it's unfolding, unraveling right before you supernaturally by a supernatural God who does supernatural things, that he reigns forever. He is sovereign. He is holy. And the glory of God sooner or later is going to give that little horde the green light, but not yet, because all the structures are not in place. That's why I said that all this technology and all this infrastructure has to be totally in place, but they're very close and sooner than you think so. I want to make that very clear. The third PowerPoint to the first set of PowerPoints was the Gaza Strip, and simply write that and write phase 2. And I know that I've been saying I'm going to do phase 2, but look, God keeps pouring out revelation. And I believe that, as I said, everything has its due process. It must go through its due process. But eventually, I will release phase 2 to the Gaza Strip. Then PowerPoint number 4, I said the time was 9:47 a.m. and the grace of God said take over on July the 3rd, 2026 at 9:47 a.m. The grace of God said take over. And let me put my pen down. And the reason I put my pen down is that you are for a rude awakening, because you're going to see things accelerate. You're going to see the acceleration of the rise of the jihadists, the rise of the Islamic revolution, because in my closing to part 1 of this title, the glory of God closed in great fashion, sending a stern warning that was coming is the great revolution. Everything being revolutionized, not only from nations and leaders and world power, different structures in place, one empire being Christ on the world stage, the false prophet, and God simply saying at 9:47 a.m. that on July 3rd, when he said that word take over, what you're going to see, what you're beginning to get a glimpse of it, is socialism, communism. What you're beginning to see that lately, when it came not only to, there were 3 socialist leaders that not only won, but you're beginning to see socialism being put in place, being implemented in the U.S. PowerPoint number 4, I said the rise of Islam, but be careful when it comes to socialism, because there's no need for you to lose your patience. There's no need for you to say lose your peace, because what you need to understand that in order for the Antichrist to be able to dominate, you have to understand all infrastructure, all of the technology that you see today, not only all of the nations and all of the countries around the world have to, with America, have to come under socialism, communism, and Marxism. And some going to say that's never going to happen. I can go into a debate and debate with you, because that's exactly how God is allowing them to set it up in Lucifer, in the Antichrist, with the false prophet, with the globalists, with the World Health Organization, with the World Economic Forum, with the UN, and the Lord said with the IMF. They're going to consolidate everything and consolidate the banks. They're going to monitor your step. They're going to take away and strip your freedom of speech. Your freedom of speech and freedom of rights is going to be stripped. And the Antichrist is going to completely dominate and monitor everyone because of this tracking system that they basically already got in place. So I want to make that very clear before you come out and say that this is never going to happen in America. Let me tell you, it's already happening, because you're beginning to see socialism. I want to make that very clear. Then PowerPoint number 5 was the rise of Islam, and I already said that. Then PowerPoint number 6 to the first set of PowerPoints was the crisis, and you're beginning to see not only the global crisis, and you're beginning to see global chaos and global confusion, and you're beginning to see the moral decay and everything eroding and the erosion of civilization and humanity, and you're beginning to see that people completely losing it. They've lost their mind. They're doing things that they've never done before, and then I have said that many, out of convenience and out of comfort, will please the Antichrist, and to be able to make a living, they will take the mark of the beast. PowerPoint number 7 to the first set of PowerPoint. The time was 9:49 a.m. July the 3rd, which was yesterday, and the glory of God said the betrayal. And here's the reason why. What we're beginning to see in D.C., and I'm talking about Washington, D.C., what we're beginning to see globally around the world, and not just in the States and in America. You're beginning to see politicians turn on politicians. You're beginning to see Americans turn on Americans. You're beginning to see church leaders turning on church leaders. You're beginning to see the great confusion when it comes to the body of Christ. Not only deeply divided, totally confused, there's great confusions in the body of Christ. And that's why God said that PowerPoint number 7 at 9:49 p.m. yesterday, July 3rd, 2026, the grace of God said the betrayal. And that's what you're beginning to see. And the glory of God just said to me, also is the great deception. And the Lord showed me these words: cunning and deceiving not only world leaders, world power, world governments, but also leaders in the body of Christ being totally exposed. And God is saying you're going to see the scattering, the scramble, the betrayal, and even your loved ones. I said they're going to turn you in, and you're going to see divided into two. PowerPoint number 8, I said Wormwood. I told you Revelation chapter 8, and we're closer than you think so to Revelation chapter 8, and that star called Wormwood falling from the sky. Then I said that at 9:53 a.m. yesterday, which is PowerPoint number 9, at 9:53 a.m., the grace of God said the persecution. And you're going to see the rise of Erdogan, not only the rise of Erdogan going up to the north with those leaders that he will put together. And remember I said, the 10 undistinguished king is a different structure. It's a different structure than the one that Erdogan puts together. And also it's a different structure when it comes to the structure of the Board of Peace. So that's the first set of PowerPoints that I wanted to talk to you and release to you, because I did a title, part 22. I did part 2 and 3 to the kingdom of heaven is at hand, and you need to go and listen to that telecast. But remember part 6 of the trigger, and I have said over and over that when we release part 6 of the trigger, everything will accelerate, because God unfolding, it's unraveling supernaturally by supernatural God, doing supernatural things, revealing supernaturally, bringing divine intervention. Not only divine intervention, but simply saying to civilization, what you're going to see pretty soon is the solid crown prince. And you got Daniel 9:27, the enforcer of the covenant. And remember I said to pencil in Daniel chapter 8 when it comes to the not only the goat and the ram, because you need to also write down next to that the Shiites and the Sunnis. I'm going to close with this one PowerPoint, and that is that you need in your spare time, go and read Daniel 8 verse 26, go read Daniel 9 verse 27, go read in your spare time Matthew 25 verse 6. There's a cry that's coming from the wailing walls of Jerusalem. You got Zechariah 12:3. But not only a wailing cry from Jerusalem, but there is coming something else, that the glory of God drops a bombshell, and there's coming a cry louder than the walls of Jerusalem. And that cry is the cry of civilization, because you're going to see the persecution, the betrayal, the alliance, the global alliance, global shift of the alliance, and the glory of God sounding the alarm that you need to prepare, because God is going to open up the Lamb's Book of Life. We're going to leave this earth sooner than you think. So in the removal, in my benediction to this title, part 1, the grace of God said was coming, the seal, the separation, and God simply putting the world on notice that what you have in place is different structures, different leaders. And keep in mind that in this part 2, the Lord quickly spoke concerning Western civilization. So I want to close simply by giving you the other set of PowerPoints, and then I'm going to do a part 3, and that will be the ending to this title called The Rise of Erdogan, but the Rise of the Saudi Crown Prince, the Alliance, and below that, the Undistinguished Ten Kings. Here is the second set of PowerPoints. 1, the structure. I told you to write below a different structure, one final empire. PowerPoint number 2, simply write the Saudi Crown Prince. Below it, the enforcer of the covenant, Daniel 9 verse 27. Then I told you to write PowerPoint number 3, the time was 4:21 p.m. and the glory of God comes to me today, July 4, 2026. And the Lord said, the alliance. Then PowerPoint number 4 is the Islamic revolution worldwide, because in the closing to the benediction, when I was about to close, when I got to PowerPoint number 4, the grace of God closed in the benediction by saying that what's coming is the seal, the separation. But then he came out and said, the revolution, the great revolution, the great shift of powers in alliance globally around the world. The Lord shifting and moving the hearts of world leader, implementing, putting together, giving them not only powers to put together this final infrastructure, not only behind all of this technology concerning AI and so on. And the glory of God simply saying, get ready. And PowerPoint number 5 to the second set of PowerPoints is the board of the structure of peace. And I said, keep in mind that some of those leaders are not only come from a Roman Catholic background, but also some of those leaders are Islamic leaders out of the Middle East. I said, you got Rome, you got Islam, and you got Israel. And I said, they kiss. And I said, keep in mind that a lot of these leaders are in their late 60s, 70, or early 80. And the grace of God came out and confirmed that during the Great Tribulation, the last 3.5 years, God is confirming that more than likely, when you see the structures and the different structures in place during the Great Tribulation, more than likely, these are going to be different leaders. Some will be removed, some have gone and passed away, and some are going to still be in place because they have not only an assignment and they got to fulfill the mandate of that assignment which they've been given. Then I said for PowerPoint number 6, I said that at 4:25 p.m. today, the Lord said the mark. That means the mark of the beast. At 4:21, he says the alliance. Then I said to you, PowerPoint number 7, the kings from the east. And many are saying that President Xi is the king from the east. And I'm simply going to say to you, that's not the case, because I'm going to explain to you PowerPoint number 10. You saw me go from PowerPoint number 7, which is the king from the east, to PowerPoint number 10, God's divine prophecy concerning Taiwan. And you're going to need to listen now. for that title in that telecast when I speak on God's divine prophecy concerning Taiwan in the Taiwan Strait. But remember, PowerPoint number 8, I said for you to write down future leaders. When it came to the second set of PowerPoints, I told you PowerPoint number 8 was future leaders, because God is confirming that in the last 3.5 years of the tribulation period, which is the great tribulation period, some of these leaders won't be in place. It will be different leaders with the 10 kings, with the Antichrist, with the false prophet, and you got a one world government, a one world currency, the digital currency, and you got the establishment of the 11th hour and the revived Roman Empire, and the Antichrist dominating and taking full control during the 7-year tribulation period. And I am reminded by God just now that God said last week, or in my prior telecast, which we just did, God said what's coming is that he's going to open the books. We're going to find ourselves, the saints and believers, the church grace in the grace period. We're going to find ourselves at the judgment seat, and God simply saying he's going to open up the first seal. Remember, there is the seal, the trumpet judgment. There is the seal, the trumpet in the bowls. I want to make that very clear. And then PowerPoint number 9, it was 4:29 p.m. when the grace of God brought a divine utterance, and God's not only sending divine warning shots, not only to the lukewarm, to the backslider, that God is saying what you're beginning to see shape up real quickly is Matthew 25 verse 6 and 1 Thessalonians chapter 5 verse number 2. I leave it right here. May the Lord so richly bless you. Remember to click like, share, subscribe, hit on the bell to receive our latest telecast. And I catch you on my next telecast of Catch and Go. God bless.